Everyone. So we have our suspect. 21-year-old suspect in Sherwood Park explosions identified. Family issues statement. Quote, the 21-year-old suspect in Tuesday evening's parkade explosions in Sherwood Park has been identified as Kane Kosolowski. RCMP said in a news release Thursday afternoon that, quote, this was a singular event. An autopsy determined Kosolowski died from a gunshot wound. No further suspects are being sought, the RCMP said. Kosolowski's family released a statement through the RCMP, and I won't read that, but the link will be in the description. So wrap it up, right? We've got a suspect, so the investigation will find that he's acting by himself. I mean, we don't even need an investigation. They already know that it's a singular event. Look at this. This was a singular event. So I'm going to thank Ken Foster. You write some long comments, sir, and I read them, and I appreciate it. And I'm going to use yours today, so I hope that's all right. You make some great points. I'm going to address a couple of things. One, a whole bunch of people started talking about Islam and its role in this attack. And I didn't mention Islam in my report, and the police didn't say anything about Islam, but there was a lot of people who talked about that. Why? We're going to look at why. We are going to look at why. And not to say that I didn't mean to implicate Islam in this. I don't know, one way or the other. I have no idea. I don't know what motivated Mr. Kosolowski. It's not like white people have been unheard of from converting to Islamic or being Muslim, right? So here's Sinede O'Connor, who won't mix with disgusting white people after becoming a Muslim. So, that should give you an idea of how Muslims view white people. If Sinede doesn't like us after becoming Muslim, has she looked in a mirror? I wonder. But I'm going to address that. So why did people go right to Islam? I don't know. I do know, and we're going to talk about it. And I'm going to look at the timeline of events. So there's a lot more questions, is what I'm saying, after this name is released and the family issues their statement. I'm glad we have a suspect. That's wonderful. I don't care about his race or anything. I care about the why. I care about what he did. So why he did it and what he did. Both of those things. Why would you commit a terrorist act? Why? What could possibly motivate you? If we could understand that, maybe we could prevent it in the future, right? So, timeline of events. The Strathcona County RCMP were called to the building at 6:30 p.m. Tuesday after a fire was reported. Investigators later found an explosion had taken place in the parkade. A suspect male was found in a vehicle and was taken to hospital where he died. Police say that the injuries were not related to encounters with police. The RCMP did not initially release the identity of the deceased, only his age. On Thursday, RCMP told the Canadian press the dead man was not connected to any group or ideology, but his motives remain unclear. Okay, so they specifically said he is not connected to any group or ideology. They only released his age and said his motives were unclear and didn't give his name. At what point does somebody who commits a terrorist act have privacy rights? They committed this act. This person was found in the vehicle, and they're saying that, one, he doesn't have a connection to a group or ideology, and two, his motives are unclear. So if you know or suspect that he was the bomber, then why not release his name then? Not releasing his name and specifically saying he's not connected to an ideology breeds suspicion, breeds rumor, breeds conversation. And again, I'm going to get into why it goes to Islamic extremism, because there's reason for it. There is a reason for it. Our media is the reason for it. And the fact that Islamic extremism is calling for violence in the West. So there's a good reason. There's not even just a reason for it. There's a good reason for it. So, and by the RCMP's actions here don't diminish suspicion that it was connected with Islamic extremism. It was a bombing, which is in line with the violence. And I'll get to that in just a minute. I've got a news article that talks about it specifically. And so when you've got these patterns that fit, RCMP not releasing the name of the perpetrator, the RCMP having a prepared statement with the family as they roll information out. These things are starting to be consistent across Canada. It doesn't matter if you're in Toronto or British Columbia or Edmonton, it's consistent. And maybe that's the RCMP's, that's their process. But if that's their process, then they need to make that a lot more clear than they do. And they need to allow for not releasing inflammatory information while keeping other information under wraps that could inform the conversation going forward. So it's very interesting, all of the pieces that are moving on this, that are kind of aligning to implicate Islamic extremism, even though by the race of this person, he appears to be a white kid, doesn't look like he would have any Islamic connections. But that, again, doesn't mean anything, right? Sinede O'Connor can become a Muslim, then, not to say anybody can become a Muslim, but anything could happen. Who's to say? And who's to say that this kid doesn't have any ties to an extremist ideology? How do they know that after one day? And sharing that information would be helpful, right? We've had a high school closed for 2 days, Wednesday, Thursday. It's open today. I called them to check because I watched this and I saw this was posted at 8 o'clock last night. And I wanted to know if the high school was open today. I wanted to find out if the investigation was over. It seems like it is, or it seems like they deem it safe enough for the kids to return to school. But if you've got a closed school and zero information coming out, and the knowledge that it was 2 bombs that went off and a single 21-year-old male who was killed in the explosion, and the implication is, no, he doesn't have any connections to any group or ideology, but we don't know why he did it. And we're not going to release his name right now. It smells fishy. It stinks.
School's canceled, so Caleb Hess and Riley Johnson head to the gym. It's a welcome break from the rumor mill.
People have just been sitting at home and I think just trying to figure out what is going on with the school and why someone would do that.
That's worrying because it's right there. It's right in our own community where we spend most of our days.
Their school, Salisbury Composite High, has been closed since 2 explosions shook the parkade across the street. Not knowing what's happening, why, or when classes will resume has been hard.
It happened right beside our school, and what's to say nothing else would happen? What's to say nothing like this will ever happen again?
And that's some legitimate fears from a kid who shouldn't have to be dealing with that. That's terrible. So why? Why did I say that this was the Islamic speculation was called for? August 22nd, 2018, Global News reporting, ISIS leader al-Baghdadi appears to call for attacks on Canada in new audio recording. Quote, the leader of the Islamic State group has called for attacks on Canada and other Western countries in new audio recording, the first attributed to him in nearly a year. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi urged the group's followers to respond to recent defeats by carrying out bombings, stabbings, and vehicular attacks in his purported 55-minute speech titled, quote, Give Glad Tidings to the Steadfast, which was published by the group's media wing on Wednesday. I'm going to skip down. The Islamic State, which until last year controlled large swaths of Syria and Iraq, has since been driven into the desert by the successive defeats in offensives by international allies in both countries. That the short version is Donald Trump destroyed them, and now they're trying to snake back into the countries that they left to fight for ISIS back when ISIS was a well-funded terrorist organization and was gaining ground on the U.S., who was running away from them. They weren't engaging because they weren't allowed to because their commander-in-chief told them not to. If you fight your enemies, they win. I think that was the quote that was attributed to one of his generals. And Trudeau as well. So the explosive used, and I was going to get into technical details here, but the explosive used or that is blamed for this one is Tannerite, and I talked about that. And the company, this is a Forbes article about a bombing in Chelsea that was also blamed on Tannerite, and this is just a quick statement by the owner of the company about Tannerite and how it works. So, quote, the company that makes Tannerite is skeptical that it was used in the bombing, the Chelsea bombing. Steve Yeager, the company investigator, says he has not been able to confirm with the FBI or other law enforcement agencies that Tannerite was in fact found in New York bombs. What's more, he said he doesn't know how it could have been used. In the company's test, says Yeager, Tannerite can only be detonated by the high-impact velocity bullet. A burning fuse, an electrical current, a hammer blow, none of those will work according to him. There have been no reports that a gunshot was used to trigger the bomb that exploded in New York on Sunday. There are other ways to detonate an aluminum oxide and ammonium nitrate bomb, though. The bomb is in this test of an ammonia done by scientists at the Los Angeles lab were set off with standard detonators and boosters used to produce a shock with enough energy to explode the mixture. We'll need information from law enforcement agencies before we know what happened in Chelsea. So they're saying like these guys were able to rig up the basic components of Tannerite are aluminum oxide and ammonium nitrate, and they were saying that they were able to rig up an explosive to blow with some other wasn't set off by a bullet's velocity, which is what the investigator states. So I thought that was interesting that we have a bomb that goes off at 6:30 and the perpetrator is deceased or on the way to the hospital and then deceased. And then 2 hours later, the next explosion goes off. So who set off the second explosion? So that's back to the timeline, and it's suspect. So quickly back to Mr. Foster's post, there are outstanding questions. How did this person get shot? Was it a self-inflicted gunshot wound? They said specifically the police didn't shoot him. Did he shoot himself? Are they not reporting that? If he shot himself, where did he shoot himself? In the head, in the leg, in the stomach? How did he get shot? The other question raised by Mr. Foster as well is whose vehicle was he sitting in? Was he sitting in the vehicle filled with explosives, or was he sitting in another vehicle? Was he sitting in his own vehicle? The information we have is not enough to conclusively say that which explosives were used and how they were set off, and there are so many more questions than answers. Okay, and now we're going to go look at some other Islamic or still investigated bombings and other calls to war, calls to attack the West by ISIS that have happened since August recently. So here's a homemade bomb in Mississauga, Ontario restaurant. Blast contained nails, police say. Materials and explosive device likely intended to maximize injuries. Suspects still at large. And links in the description if you want to read that. Here's one that was from August 24th from the Toronto Sun. Secrecy and lack of info follows security incident at Parliament Hill. And this is a car jumping the sidewalk and driving over people. Quote, a senator speaking out against the apparent secrecy on Parliament Hill following a security incident involving a pickup truck that happened the other week. Quote, I don't understand how we could have had such a serious breach on the Hill where a couple of people have been injured and we don't even know what has happened. Conservative Senator Leo Housakis has said to the Sun about the recent incident. Why the secrecy? On August 11th, Ottawa paramedics responded to a call at 9:37 p.m. in front of the western part of the Parliament buildings. A woman in her 50s was taken to the hospital in stable condition with a foot injury after being run over by a pickup truck, and a man in his 70s, also in stable condition, was sent to a hospital for a hip injury from the same incident. An eyewitness told the Ottawa Sun the vehicle was first in a line of cars on Victoria Street, a short street that runs alongside the hill and leads to both public parking and the vehicle entrance to the main Parliament buildings. The truck then mounted the curb, struck the individuals, and turned into Parliament Hill vehicle screening facility. The man driving the vehicle then got out of the car, attempted to run, and was tackled by officers. We just yelled, oh my gosh. We were in shock. Skipping down a bit, quote, this matter is not related to national security, RCMP spokesperson Stephanie Dumoulin told The Sun. Other than that, the RCMP would not answer other questions, citing ongoing investigation. Thank goodness, right? Not related to national security. Whew. Wipe your brow, everyone. Back to the article. Neither Speaker's office nor the PMO would offer any comment on the matter, either relating the facts of the incident or the relative lack of information made available. They all referred to the Sun, to the PPS, which in turn referred all questions to the RCMP, which said nothing. The Ottawa police did not put out a release concerning the incident, and both the OPS and RCMP have confirmed no charges have been laid. Several parliamentarians who likely should have been notified didn't learn about the incident until much later, and then only received minimal information. Quote, I think we have a right to know what happened and why it happened, says Housakis. Those are simple questions. In 2015, Housakis served as Speaker of the Senate, which is one of the two posts that the PPS, which is responsible for security on the Hill, reports to. So there's one. Here's another. RCMP rule out terrorism after truck injures pedestrian on Hill screening facility. So this is the same incident, just a different report. And I looked at the report on this. So August 11th, 9:30 was a Saturday night. So this report was released on the 14th, which is the following Tuesday. Unbelievable. right? Like that's a lot of time to not release anything after a truck mounts a curb and strikes some pedestrians. 11, 12, 13, 14, right? So I'm just going to read this here. Alfara said he had just turned north from Wellington onto Victoria Street, which is between Parliament Hill and the Supreme Court of Canada, and was in a lineup of vehicles trying to find parking. They saw a white, older model pickup truck, a few vehicles ahead of them in line, suddenly make a right turn and jump onto the sidewalk. Alfara said he saw a man push a woman pushing a child in a stroller out of the way at the last minute to avoid being hit by the truck. Quote, "That guy's my hero. Thank God they weren't hurt." Then the truck turned right into the parking lot of the Parliament Hill screening facility. Alfara said the man driving the truck jumped out of the vehicle and started to run, but was tackled by police. Alfara said he and his girlfriend were shocked by what they saw, especially in light of recent vehicle attacks around the world that have killed and injured many. In April, 10 people were killed and 15 injured when a van driven by 25-year-old Alec Minsanian drove into lunch hour pedestrians in Toronto. On Tuesday, a car rammed into a barrier outside the British Parliament, injuring 3 people. So... And here's another article about the same incident on the updated the next day. I won't go through it. Here's the Danforth shooting spree that I won't go through. But again, this was another, I think it was four days until they released his name. And then the family simultaneously released a spun PR statement from, you can read the article about it from The Rebel, who did a good job, I thought, covering it. But my point isn't that, yeah, it's definitely Islam. My point is, there is good reason, and a thinking person could suspect that some people may have heard an ISIS leader call for attacks on Canada. And those people, who, if they are following ISIS, are likely Muslim people, are following through with that call. That's not Islamophobic. That's not an incorrect conclusion to come to. That's not even an out there conclusion to come to. That's probably pretty reasonable. If you followed somebody online and that person online told you to do XYZ, go and enter this contest. Maybe you do it. And maybe there's not a correlation between entering a contest and following through with Islamic attacks. But I don't know. I'm not indoctrinated into being an ISIS fighter, right? I'm not following their ideology. So there's good reason to suspect when the RCMP and the police and the powers that be don't release information and imply through releasing some information, like he doesn't follow an ideology and this wasn't hate motivated or whatever. When they put things out like that makes it seem like they're prepping the public for his name to be something Islamic, in light of all of this other information that we just talked about, that Islam is calling for attacks, that those attacks are specifically bombings or stabbings or vehicular attacks, and that this was a bombing, right? Like, there is good reason to suspect that this was a radicalized Islamic attack. And it is not racist to ask that question. It is absolutely reasonable to say, is this a foreign fighter bringing a war to our country? That is the question I have. And further, why is our government not doing anything but importing more people from areas that were controlled by the Islamic State? Right? The Islamic State, which until last year controlled large swaths of Syria. So we're bringing in, we just lost 50,000 Syrians. And all of a sudden, we've got all of these attacks, vehicular attacks and bombings and stabbings, and not Sinede O'Connor. The point is, we need to have an honest conversation where we're not afraid to be called racist if we say, hey, it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck. Do you think it might be a duck? I don't care that the kid's white. We need more information, way more information. How did he get the explosives? Who set off the second one? Were they both set off the same? Did he set off the first explosion? There's a lot more here, and I understand there's an investigation, but this is going to get memory hold. People are going to forget. Did you forget about the Mississauga bombing? I forgot about the Mississauga bombing until I looked up bombings in Mississauga, or bombings in Toronto, and the Mississauga one came up. And so there are high-profile things, and there are things they try and sweep under the rug, and if they can get away with not telling anybody, even the government, even the people who oversee the agencies who are supposed to be reported to if these things happen, they don't hear about it and they're angry. These people aren't telling the Canadian public anything. Nothing at all. And you're racist if you ask. You racist. So I'm asking for people to take off their looking to problematize things, take off their looking to problematize things hat, and start putting on your thinking hat and looking at the information that's coming out. There are people who want to do harm to Canada. They appear to be within our government writing our laws and importing their fighters right now. That's what it looks like. So, I don't know. I was interested to read through the comments. I'm interested to see how this story finishes. I'm sure there's a lot more to it. The point isn't to blame somebody. The point is to get as much good information out so we can have as robust a conversation as we can about where our immigration and our funding of mosques and funding of, and I'm talking federal funding of terrorists, because Trudeau's government has approved agencies that the Harper government banned because of their ties to terrorism. And so we need to look at that. That needs to influence our conversation. And this guy's motivation needs to influence our conversation too. Just the same, exactly the same. This guy detonated 2 bombs in a Canadian city. Why? We need to know a lot more, and not pat on the head, everything's fine, move on with your day, guys. Go right back to high school that's right across the street. No, this needs an actual conversation, a national conversation. So I hope that my position on this has been clarified. It's a tough one because there are laws about this, and they're trying to make laws about this, and they're trying to push this stuff to be as difficult to talk about as it is in England, as it is in the UK. Just listen to what they say about what the press says about Tony Robinson, and all the guy wants to do is stop Muslim grooming rape gangs from operating with impunity in England. Really, that's the fight, and the press is trying to vilify him. So incredible world we live in. And sorry this video got really long. And thanks for watching. Check out peoplespartyofcanada.ca and let's start having an honest national conversation about everything.